Hello and welcome to the Advisory Health Council's Wellness Spotlight. We all know that stress can be bad for your health. These days, one of the biggest things most people are stressed out about is money. Since medical bills are the #1 cause of personal bankruptcy in the United States today, people are choosing to be more proactive in keeping themselves healthier. After all, if you don't make time for wellness, you'll have to make time for illness. Even so, if you're doing the things that a healthier lifestyle entails, like eating right, exercising, getting your spine adjusted, drinking plenty of water, and avoiding unnecessary drugs, and so on, how can you be well when you're upset over finances? If your money's tight, it affects the quality of your thoughts, actions, and emotions. Stress over money can adversely affect the quality of your rest and even how you relate to yourself and the world around you. The long-term effect isn't good for your sense of well-being. To help learn about legal, creative strategies we can use to combat and ease the financial stress of today, I have as my special guest Jodi Carter, a certified public accountant with offices in East Brunswick. Jodi, welcome to the Wellness Spotlight.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So Jodi, tell us, what was it that made you become an accountant?
Well, we'll say I was very, very good in math and loved money from a very young age. My parents found it very amusing and just kept teasing me and saying, you should be an accountant. And so the first time I had an opportunity to take an accounting class in high school, I did, and it was just natural. And while I watched other students struggle, it was so easy for me that I decided this might be a good thing to pursue.
Tell us, does everybody need an accountant?
A lot of people need an accountant. If you're someone who's right out of school, let's say, and you just have your first job and a W-2 and just that income, it may make sense to speak to mom and dad's accountant and find out if there's something you should be looking at. Until you own a home or start thinking about those things, it might be a little too soon. But once you're someone who owns a home, has a business, or is working for a company and may have expenses for your work, all of those things require the consultation of an accountant.
Now, there are lots of different ways accountants can do their work, and they have lots of different backgrounds and experience. Can you tell our viewers a little bit about you?
Sure. I actually started working for an accounting firm when I was in high school. So I've actually been doing this for more than 20 years. I worked all through college at a particular accounting firm. And then after I graduated college, I started seeking opportunities that would give me opportunities for growth. I ended up with a firm right here in East Brunswick, a small firm that was then owned by Gerald Elkins, an East Brunswick resident since the 70s. And he became my mentor. And I grew in his practice and ultimately bought him out. And so that's how my practice got its roots in East Brunswick.
And where are you located?
We are in Turnpike Plaza on Route 18.
I see. And how are things going?
Really well.
You must be very busy this time of year.
Yes, we are gearing up and getting ready. There's lots and lots of processes to prepare during the month of January so that we're ready when all of our clients have the materials they need for February. And we also work with a lot of small businesses, so we're busy throughout the year, not just, February through April.
Jodi, everybody knows that, especially these days, we're living in some very financially stressful times. Mm-hmm. What recommendations do you have for people to be able to lower that stress?
Well, there's a lot of different situations going on. For one thing, if you have an entrepreneurial spirit, this is a great time to think about starting your own business, something that maybe you've thought about doing. I understand a lot of people who have been laid off or lost their jobs are starting to pursue those other interests. If you have equity in your home or other investments and things that you could have some startup capital, it's a great time. There may be some places you can get loans and things to get things started. So that's one way. Another way is to really think about saving and what have you been doing and what habits can you change. Our country is riddled with debt, not just the country, but the individuals inside of it. So credit card debt is at an extreme. So if people start thinking more about how they're spending, how they're saving, that can relieve a lot of stress. And I think working through budgets and starting to plan that way would make a big difference for people.
You bring up a very interesting point about credit card debt. Credit card companies are charging many of them over 20%. What can some people do to be able to lower their credit card debt and also lower the amount of interest that they're paying on the money that they've charged to credit cards?
Well, they should make a phone call at the very least, call the credit card companies and ask to have the credit lowered. If you're making your payments every month, that's a good way to do it. You also want to organize it. The first thing you have to do is have a reality check. You have to know what you have, who you owe, and how much. A lot of people, the bill comes and they pay minimum payments. That's not enough. You really have to be looking at how can we budget to get these things paid off. The one thing that you want to make sure that you start to learn about, though, is how your credit score works. Because sometimes people go and close cards, and that actually lowers your credit score. Or they keep opening cards to move the balances around, and that lowers your credit score. And all of that has a huge impact. It's unfortunate, but credit scores are not designed to help the consumer. The consumer isn't the one that pays for the credit scores. It's the companies that do the lending that pay for the credit score bureaus. And so because of that, it's not set up for the consumer to win. So you have to be very careful about the decisions you make about your credit.
You also hear today about lots of people who own homes looking to have their property values reassessed to lower their property taxes. Could you speak a little bit about that?
Yes, if you can find an appraiser to work with who can help you understand what's happening with the taxes and to find out if you're a candidate to have your taxes reduced, you should do that. I don't know how much effort it takes or how the towns will be receptive to it if it becomes a mass appeal. But it is interesting to note that all of our taxes went up for this year, but all of our property values went down. So there's
how did that happen?
Something not quite right there, but we really, people as individuals can look at that and determine if there's something they can do to help themselves.
You know, Jodi, I remember when I was at Rutgers as an undergraduate student, and I took economics and accounting. I remember my dear teacher, Dr. Shirley Arbisfeld, and she used to say, tax evasion is illegal, but tax avoidance is legal. And most people see using an accountant as a very effective way of being able to lower their tax exposure and still be within the letter of the law. What are some things that people can do to be able to avoid paying excessive taxes and be able to legally lower their exposure?
I don't like the word avoid either because it has a negative connotation, but I think what you have to realize is that we're required to pay the least legal tax dollar. That's the way the law is written. So if you look at it inside that framework, the reason you want to work with an accountant and know what's happening is because you want to make sure that you're taking advantage of every deduction that's allowable to you. You want to make sure that you get the information properly, that you're working with someone that asks you questions about your life and make sure that nothing is missed.
Okay, so within the context of health and wellness or even medical care, what are some things that people can do to be able to lower their tax exposure?
Well, in terms of health care and the costs of that, the way that the deductions work for medical purposes is that anything that you pay out of pocket can qualify as a tax deduction. Now there's limitations, and that's where it starts to get a little bit confusing, and that's where people really do need assistance. If your medical insurance, for example, is paid through your employer, it may be taken out of your pay pre-tax, is what they call it, before the taxes are computed. If that's the case, then your health insurance will not be deductible for federal purposes, but we're in New Jersey, and New Jersey handles it a little bit differently. So in New Jersey, even if your health insurance is taken out of your pay pre-tax, it's not pre-tax for New Jersey. So what that means is that amount is deductible on your New Jersey tax return. That's one thing that I find that a lot of people miss. That, in addition to every dollar that you spend for health care, can reduce your income so that you pay lower taxes.
So we're talking about visits to the doctor, prescription medications, things like that.
Yes.
Are there any things that most people don't really think about or consider as deductions?
There are. I find a lot of times when people come to me for the first time, there's certain things that they don't realize. One of them, for example, is supplies. So many people use contact lenses, and they don't realize that all of the solution that they use to clean it, that's deductible. All of those supplies that you use to help with your health care are deductible. Also, your travel to and from your doctors. And many of us travel far and wide to a really good doctor. All of the expenses related to your travel are deductible.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely.
So back support cushions, a cane, a walker,
Yes.
Anything like that would also be deductible as well.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Now, we have a friend, a good friend, Sharon Dubinsky, who's the director of Brunswick Reading and Speech Center in East Brunswick, and she helps a lot of children who have special needs or want to read or perform better in school. And she told me something very interesting. She said that special education and these types of lessons that you could buy or reading and speech center services are also tax deductible.
As long as there's a medical diagnosis, yes, they are. So if you have a child that's been classified, or if you have a child that's been diagnosed with ADHD, or any of those kinds of learning disability or issues that they may have, if they've been medically diagnosed, and you can get a letter from a doctor saying that they have this problem, anything you do to support their education becomes a medical deduction. Similarly, we have a lot of children in our society now who are suffering with autism. And if you have a child that has autism, if you're using a special school or doing something in addition to help them, all of that is a health deduction as well.
Interesting, okay. Now, I've heard a lot about weight loss programs. Are they eligible as well?
Well, this is tricky. The first year that they put that in, a lot of people came to me and said, I'm using Weight Watchers, that's tax deductible. And I said, well, hold on, not so fast, because here's how the law is written. You need to have a medical diagnosis for that as well. So hypertension, diabetes, something like that. You want a doctor to put in writing that this is what they found in your health through blood work or tests or whatever issues they found, and that what they're prescribing for you are these things. So that will not include things like your gym fees, because the government will say, well, you could work out at home just as easily as you could work out in a gym.
So gym fees are not tax deductible?
Gym fees will not be tax deductible. Neither will your food. If you're using a plan like Nutrisystem or Jenny Craig, those may be great plans and they may work very well for you, but the food is not deductible because the government says, well, you have to eat. You could go to the market and buy produce and do it yourself. So those things are not deductible.
Now, based upon what you said, is it safe for us to assume that also vitamins and other supplements would not be tax deductible unless they were prescribed by a physician?
Exactly. Yes, they have to be prescribed. If it's over the counter, you can go out and buy it yourself. The rule of thumb is it's probably not deductible, and you may be able to get something in writing from your doctor that says that. But you really want that in writing the year that you start to deduct it on your tax return, so it's in your records. You don't want to wait until you're examined 3 years later and then go back to the doctor and say, can you put this in writing now? Get it the year that they say it. I'm sure they'll be happy to do it if it's a factual event.
People sometimes talk about their medical expenses not being enough to be deductible. Can you talk a little bit about what that means?
Yeah, you know, there's nothing simple about our tax system. So how it works is all of your income is calculated, and that brings you to something called your gross income. And then they start to deduct different things. So when the deductions start to come, that brings you to something called your adjusted gross income. From there, you can take a look at your medical expenses. So we're already at the third tier. This is why you need an accountant. At that point, for federal purposes, you have to take that adjusted gross income number, you have to multiply it by 7.5%, and that's the base before you can even start deducting any medical expenses. So sometimes I'll be working with someone and I'll say to them, how are your medical expenses this year? And they'll say, oh, I had a lot. And I'll do that little calculation and I'll say, was it more than X? And they'll say, oh, no, it wasn't more than that. Well, then it's not deductible for federal purposes. And again, I mentioned before, New Jersey's a little bit different. For New Jersey, there is also that floor, but it's not 7.5%, it's 2.5%. It's 2%, I'm sorry, it's 2%. And that amount will include your health insurance because, again, that's not pre-tax. So you have a much bigger window there with health deductions for New Jersey.
Wellness is not covered by most insurance plans. So what can somebody do to be able to ease, the cost of the products and the services that they buy for their sense of wellness and well-being?
Well, for one thing, you want to make sure that you're considering whether or not it's tax deductible, because if it is falling into that, it's really saving you a third of the cost because you'll get that back in tax dollars. So you really want to take a look and see if that will make a difference. And also, I think when you're considering your health and wellness care, you want to take a look at, is your insurance plan really working for you? Does it make sense? Is it the right plan? Because perhaps you're spending dollars on insurance that aren't benefiting you completely, or you could change your plan to a different kind of plan and then use those same dollars for your wellness care.
Do insurance plan, if a person checks their insurance policy, Jodi, will the policy tell them whether or not certain services are tax deductible?
Oh no, not at all. There are a lot of things that are tax deductible that a health insurance plan will never cover. For example, as a chiropractor, you know that a lot of times people have a certain amount that they can pay from their plan, and it's a certain number of visits. But for tax deduction purposes, whatever you would pay to a chiropractor would be deductible. Similarly, something like acupuncture, that's all deductible. Your plan may not cover that at all. And even something as common as hearing aids. I remember as a young person, my grandmother crying because she lost her hearing aid. And I said to her, well, why don't you just get another one? And she said, because they're expensive. And I said, well, doesn't your insurance cover it? And she said, no, it doesn't cover it. And so then when I started to study taxes and I realized, oh, well, you may not have it covered there. I wish she was still around so I could tell her it would actually cost a third less, because you would be able to deduct that on your taxes in full.
You mentioned a short time ago, you mentioned that people are opting for different types of insurance plans. I know something that's very popular now are health savings accounts. I know Paul Zane Pilzer, who wrote the national best-selling book, The Wellness Revolution, talks about the importance of health savings accounts. Could you speak a little bit about that?
Yes, absolutely. Health savings accounts have a great benefit, I would say particularly to people who are generally healthy. Okay, because what it does is a health savings account is something that's paired with what's called a high deductible plan.
So let's talk about exactly what that means. Now, most people, I mean, I remember in the old days, when I was first in practice, most people came to me and here was the insurance that they had. And everybody had the same insurance plan no matter what insurance company they were insured with. They had a $100 deductible, and then they had unlimited coverage for any condition that was covered under their insurance plan, and that was it. And now it seems like you have different types of plans which are as unique and as different as the people who have them. So the deductible is the amount that people have to pay before the insurance actually kicks in.
Correct.
Now, years ago, everybody opted for a low deductible plan because it meant that they paid less money out of pocket. Now people are going for higher deductible plans, as you said. And how does this all fit in?
Well, it's interesting because you really have to be able to sit and do a comparison for yourself. A high deductible plan is a plan where you'll pay a lower insurance premium, and then you'll take some of those dollars you were going to use for insurance and put them into a health savings account.
But with a higher deductible plan, they're paying more money out of pocket first before the insurance kicks in.
Perhaps, but if you're someone who doesn't use much of your insurance anyway, if you're someone that goes every year for your checkups, but you don't have other health issues or you don't have a lot of prescription drugs and things like that, then you may never reach that high deductible. You may never get to that point, so you're still saving money. But then that money that you used for your health savings account, you can then go and use for wellness care and other things that it would be suitable for.
Now, how does that work exactly? How is it structured? And who's eligible for something like this?
Well, I highly recommend it for self-employed people because they have options of choosing their own plans. And then it depends on if your employer has something like that available in the plans that they offer. So you're really limited. It's not something you can just go buy, but you have to look to see what your options are, who's providing your health care, and what choices do they have. Similarly, some employers have what they call a flexible spending account. It's different than a health savings account, but it does provide something similar in that you can put dollars in there, perhaps even pre-tax dollars, and then you can use that money for wellness care also.
And how does somebody go about setting something like this up?
It goes through whoever is administering the health care. So if your employer, it may be an HR department, it may be an insurance provider that they're working with, or a benefits counselor. If you're self-employed, you're reaching out to an insurance company yourself, so you may be able to do that on your own.
Interesting. You know, research has shown that for every dollar that a company invests in wellness for their workforce, there's a 3 to 4 to 1 return on their investment. Why do you think more employers today aren't investing in wellness? And why more insurance companies aren't looking into it?
Well, I'll answer the insurance company's question first because it's the more interesting one to me, in that why would they offer something that lowers our premiums? That's not how they make money, right? So how they make money is higher premiums with the gamble that they won't have to pay out. If they're promoting something that has a lower premium, which is more beneficial to us, well, that's not good marketing, I'll say, so good for them for doing it well. But as individuals, we should be looking out for ourselves, and we should be saying, how can I do this? That's what we've been talking about. How can I lower my costs? How can I lower my financial stress and increase my health? Well, the way to do that is to look for options, and sometimes the options you want to look for are not the ones that are being marketed to you.
I know that you've told me that one of the things that really sets your accounting practice aside, what distinguishes you from other accountants, is that you take a very active interest in your clients, and you advise them, and you spend time to teach them and speak with them. What are some of the biggest concerns, financial concerns, that most people have these days?
I think most people are concerned about whether they'll make it through the crisis that's going on right now. What happened to their retirement funds? Will they be able to retire? Will they be able to put their kids through college? The strategies that they thought were set are not set anymore. So how do you take a step back and say, okay, now what? And what I like to talk to them about is, and what did you learn? So not just where do we go from here, but what did we learn that we can take into the next lesson? And what will work for your family regardless of what's going on around us? What differences can we make for your children's future? What can we be teaching the next generation about what to do? So as their kids are starting to start their jobs, and I hate to say it, but a lot of my clients now have kids coming out of college. I've been doing this long enough. So I'm now sitting down with their kids with their first job. That's what you want to do. You want to show them what's coming out of their paycheck. Let's make good decisions about whether or not you're going to invest in that 401k and how much. And what are you going to do with the rest of your money? What will you invest in? Will you start to save for a home? Where do you want to live? What kind of expenses should you be keeping track of? How are you budgeting? How are you planning? Let's learn from where we are right now. And that's why, to me, the relationship is everything. My clients need to be able to come in and tell me exactly what's going on in their lives so I can give them the best possible advice.
From your vantage point, what do you think are some of the biggest blunders that people have made financially over the last few years?
Oh, credit cards. I couldn't say enough about how Americans use credit cards. It's become a way of life to pull out the plastic and not think about what's going to happen when the bills come due.
Well, it's not the use of the credit cards, it's carrying the balance on the credit card and letting it go up.
Yes, absolutely. I think the good thing about the plastic is that it gives you a record of how you've spent your money. But the bad thing is, I see so many people spending so much money on bank fees because they say, I'm not going to use credit cards anymore. I'll use my debit card. And then they don't keep track of a balance. Remember when we all used to keep registers and keep track? People don't do that anymore. They go to the ATM and they pull up their balance and they forget about all the checks that they wrote. And then they start bouncing things. And it's very common. And it's everyone is doing it. It's, from the person who never kept a checkbook balance to the PhD in math who knows how. Everyone is making those same mistakes because we're not thinking about the consequences of the choices that we're making.
Now, is there a rule of thumb that most people can use to be able to guide themselves on how much they should spend each month?
There's different ways of thinking about that. There's a million books that you could pull out that will tell you your housing expense shouldn't be more than 35% of your income and things like that. I think you have to start at the beginning and say, how much do I want to be saving? How much do I want to give to charity? And you have to check in with yourself and think about those things and design, I think a percentage plan makes the most sense. And then have your life work into that. But you have to make decisions. You really have to choose how you're going to spend your money, not spend your money and then wonder where it all went.
I remember reading the book called The Richest Man in Babylon. Mm-hmm. And in that book, the author said that they recommended a person save 10% of everything that they earn. So you pay yourself first and you save 10%. What do you think about that?
I love that. I love that. That's the first thing I tell young people, how much you're putting in your savings. And I also encourage them to have a short-term savings and a long-term savings. And I talk to them about having an emergency fund. How much are your bills over a 6-month period or a 12-month period? And let's build up that savings first. Okay, now you have your emergency fund. Now let's start talking about what are your short-term savings goals, what are your long-term savings goals. Absolutely pay yourself first.
Now, you mentioned young people. What do you recommend for single adults, married adults with families, and also for our senior citizens? Are there different recommendations that you make financially for people at different aspects of their life?
Absolutely, and it's very personal. It really has to be very personalized. I don't generalize. I don't have a rule that I give to certain age groups or certain people with certain age children or people that are closer to retirement. I mean, there's certain things that are just logical. As you're older, you want to invest in things that are less risky. We all know those basic kinds of things. But I also hear people make decisions like they're spending their money on, instead of putting money into the retirement account, they're paying for their children's college, or they're pulling money out of the retirement to pay for that. Well, there are college loans, but there's no such thing as a retirement loan. So you have to make sure that your retirement is funded. You can't use that to pay for your children's education. And those are the kinds of things that I see people do that I try to put the brakes on really quickly, because you really could injure yourself by making some of those choices.
Now, is the best person to speak to about investing or where to put your assets, is that person an accountant, or is it a financial advisor of some kind?
I think you need to have a team. And I think you need to have a team that communicates with each other. I think it's really important. I often tell my clients that I want to sit in the meeting with their financial advisor. Sometimes I feel a little bit like a translator, because financial people tend to speak on with all kinds of different terms and things, and the average layperson who is more like myself is sitting there saying, what was that? What did that mean? I'm a layperson too. Maybe with tax I'll get a little more technical, but with investments I won't. But I can speak in both worlds, and so I think you need to have someone that's in your corner, and the relationship is key. You want to work with an accountant, a financial advisor. You want to work with people that you feel care about you. You want them to take your call. You want them to deal with whatever concerns you have. It needs to be a relationship. It's a very important relationship in your life, because those are the people who are reporting your financial life to the government. Those are the people that are planning your financial future. You want to make sure that they know you and you know them.
You know, before I asked you about some of the biggest blunders that people made, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you what some of the smartest decisions were that people made.
That's a great question, too. I think that some people will take a look at what's going on and they will say, you know, everyone is doing this. Maybe I'll go this way. And those tend to be the smarter choices. If you're doing what everyone is doing, that may not be the best choice.
So you want to be the fish swimming against the stream, or
a little bit against the stream, just not necessarily buying everything that's being sold to you. And just really make sure that your choices are very specific to your life and your needs and what your plans are. And again, it's very personal. It depends on your career, your goals for retiring. You can't give the same advice to everyone, because one person may be retirement-minded by 50 and another by 75. So all of that has to be brought into the conversation, and then you make the decisions.
Jodi, we have about a minute to go before we finish. What tips or ideas do you have for our viewers that they won't find anywhere else that we haven't covered today? Do you have any last-minute words of advice?
Well, that they won't find anywhere else, I can't say for sure, because it all comes from the same place. But one thing that we didn't talk about was long-term care. And I think that that's very, very important. I think you can start looking for those plans in your 40s and 50s. As you get older, it gets more expensive, but those plans are very valuable. What you have to make sure that you're doing is understanding the plan and how it will work, and make sure that you're being advised properly. I have a population of aging clients now who are starting to use the plans that they bought a long time ago. And for some of them, the plan is great, and it's increasing every year, and it's helping them. Some of them are shocked to find out it's only good for 3 years, or it's only good for a certain amount, and it's not really taking care of them. But that's something that a lot of us are going to need later on, is long-term care insurance.
Jodi, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We really appreciate the time that you spent with us today and all of the terrific information that you've shared with us.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
This concludes another segment of the East Brunswick Advisory Health Council's Wellness Spotlight. I'm Dr. Ken Friedman, President of the Advisory Health Council, reminding you that wellness works when you work it.